Well, hey there, Internet people. Welcome back to Green Wing Gaming, or welcome if you're new. If you're a returning viewer, you already know the drill, but if you're new, today is a Monday video, and on Monday videos, we like talking about Warhammer. That's what we do on this channel, and so today we are continuing on with the third part of our faction focus on the Dark Angels. We are running through what the Dark Angels are looking like in 10th edition. How good are they? How not good are they? What are their units looking like? And so today, we've already, in the previous two videos, we covered the lore about the Dark Angels, you know, where it stands in 10th edition. We've covered a little bit about the Unforgiven Task Force, which is their special Dark Angels detachment, what its main rule is, and the enhancements and stratagems that they have going on. Now, today, we're going to start looking at actually the Dark Angels specific units, the units that they can use that other Space Marine armies can't. And so we're going to start off today. Now, there are a fair number of units available to the Dark Angels specifically. Today we are just going to be looking at the Deathwing units. And so, if you don't know what the Deathwing is, it is the elite first company of the Dark Angels chapter. Now, in Warhammer, most Space Marine chapters, their first company is the Honor Guard, the elite of the chapter. They are the greatest warriors of the chapter. And that remains true for the Dark Angels. Their first company is the elite. However, unlike most first companies, the Deathwing has a monopoly on Terminator armor in the Dark Angels chapter. They will occasionally loan out some of their squads to other companies, but they are the only Terminator-armed units in the Dark Angels chapter, and they are exclusively made of Terminators. They do not have anything other than Terminators in the first company. That is all they are made of. They specialize in mass teleportation assaults, and in the lore, they are, I would argue, the greatest Terminators currently operating in the Imperium. That's their thing. They have really amazing Terminators. Rules-wise, the Deathwing does not confer any inherent rules in 10th edition. That is a pretty noticeable departure from 8th and 9th, where they, in 8th, they had their own rules, and in 9th, they had some amazing rules. Some people, they were the big source of complaint by non-Dark Angels players about the Dark Angels. A lot of people thought they were wildly too strong. I disagreed, but I was very obviously a minority opinion there, because in this edition, they have no rules whatsoever. Being in the Deathwing does not confer any kind of specific advantage, but we're going to be going over some of their units today. And so, before we jump into all that, though, I would just like to remind you guys that this channel is pretty young. At time of recording, we're right around the 2-month mark. This video should be coming out in my 3rd month of being live on YouTube. And so at this point, the channel is so young that literally any engagement helps me out with the algorithm. Just by clicking on this video, you've already been a huge help. Genuinely, even a few videos at this early stage really do help. Watching all the way to the end would also really help, so maybe stick around. I think there's going to be some useful information on here. Maybe save you some time having to look at the PDF yourself. Also going to offer just a little bit of commentary about some synergies that I think might work well with these units. But other than that, maybe consider subscribing. We do more of these hobby discussion type videos every Monday. Next week we'll be finishing up the faction focus on the Dark Angels, and every Friday we have actual gameplay videos, which right now has solely consisted of a game called Rangers of Shadowdeep. However, very soon I should be getting the equipment to branch out to actually playing 40k on the channel, so I'm looking forward to that. But with all of that shameless self-promotion out of the way, we're talking about Deathwing datasheets, so let's just get into it. Okay, so we're talking about Deathwing units in 10th edition. Let's start off with the head honcho. We're talking about Belial. Belial is the captain or grandmaster of the Deathwing, and if I'm being honest, he's been hit with a bit of a nerf hammer. Or at least that's my opinion. He is an epic hero, so if you take him, you can't take any other named characters. That totally makes sense. He cannot take any enhancements, which is a bit of a shame because his stat line is not what I would call overpowering. He's basically just a regular Terminator captain, a very expensive one at that. He's has a 5-inch movement, toughness 5, a 2-up armor save, 4-up invulnerable, like every other Terminator. He has 6 wounds, leadership 6+, and an objective control of 1. His ranged weapon is just a mastercrafted Stormbolter, which is pretty much what it's always been. So that's literally just, it's exactly the same as a regular Stormbolter, but damage 2 instead of damage 1, and it has precision. Yeah, pretty standard. That's kind of more or less what it's always been. He's got the Sword of Silence for his melee, which, that's the part that's been nerfed the most, in my opinion, specifically because in previous editions, he had a rule that basically said if he's attacking anything that's not a vehicle, so whether that's a Space Marine or a Demon Prince or a battlesuit, whatever, if it doesn't have the vehicle keyword, he's wounding it on a 2+. Obviously, he doesn't have that anymore. It literally, he just is Strength 6, AP 2, 2 damage, and has Precision, which I don't think is particularly strong. It means that, like, if he's fighting in a unit that has a character, he can make his attacks go on the character. But other than that, it's not really that impressive to me. He has a rule called Grandmaster of the Deathwing, which says that any unit he joins gains critical hit. Any critical hits become precision. So if you roll a 6 to hit, it becomes a precision hit. Again, I'm super unimpressed. I don't, like, he can only join Terminator units, so he can only join other Deathwing stuff and regular Terminators, so there's not any particularly amazing shooting, so there's not really any point of trying to fish for 6s with their shooting attacks to try and gain precision, and in melee, you're fighting with Terminators with Power Fist, you're probably going to delete anything that's attached to a character anyway. You're probably not caring about precision with these units. They're so powerful in melee that you're not trying to target a particular character. I suppose there might be some instances where this becomes relevant, but I personally don't think it's particularly impressive. The only other big thing of note for him is that he has a rule called Strikes of Retribution, where literally any time an enemy unit makes a melee attack against a unit he has joined, he rolls a dice. Now, he can do this to a maximum of 6 dice, so if you do up 6 attacks or more, he can only do 6, but other than that, it's however many times you attack him, that's how many dice he rolls. And for every roll of a 2+, he causes a mortal wound back. Now, so basically, he can cause as many as 6 mortal wounds to each attacking unit. It's capped at 6 mortal wounds per unit, but then, like, if you're attacking him with multiple units, okay, that means he can be throwing back, a maximum of 6 mortal wounds to each unit. So, undeniably, that is interesting, because that could put you in a weird situation where let's say he leads a charge with some Deathwing Knights or just regular Deathwing Terminators. Okay, he whittles down a unit, but let's say that unit is particularly durable and he doesn't quite finish them off. Okay, well, now that unit almost doesn't want to attack back. I mean, they don't have a choice. You have to attack if you're in melee. But you almost don't want to, because for every attack on a 2+, you're taking a wound in return. So he could potentially just finish off a unit that he charged but failed to kill, and by doing another 6 mortal wounds. So that could be potentially devastating. I will admit that is a really interesting ability that could make his unit kind of annoying to deal with, because you think, oh, I'm going to charge that big Deathwing Death Star unit and try to get rid of him, except now Belial's rebounding back a bunch of mortal wounds. That is undeniably interesting. I still think this is a nerf. I think this character is not as interesting as he was, but that's just me. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, so that covers Belial. Like I said, I'm not super impressed with him, but then again, I don't bring named characters in general. I have the model, but I don't bring named characters. I don't find them interesting. But anyways, moving on to the only normal HQ unit for Deathwing. For the Deathwing, this is a Deathwing Strike Master. Now, this is actually a fairly new unit. This was not a model that existed until ninth edition. Like, this model literally became a thing when the new the ninth edition supplement came out. And it gave us a Strike Master. What is a Strike Master? It's basically a lieutenant, but in the Deathwing. That's all it is. It is a Deathwing lieutenant. It's in Terminator armor. So, again, typical Terminator stats. 5-inch move, toughness 5, 2 up save, 4 up invulnerable, leadership 6, OC of 1. Has 5 wounds instead of Belial's 6. That's, again, pretty standard for a lieutenant. Yeah. Other than that, the Strike Master might actually be better than Belial, because it can take enhancements, it has a wider variety of weapons, it can take a Storm Shield to gain an extra wound, so it can have just as many wounds as Belial. Obviously, it doesn't have the reflecting back mortal wounds. For this character, you can't take the Pennant of Remembrance enhancement. You probably don't want to take the Stubborn Tenacity enhancement, because you just don't want to take that enhancement in general. It's a bad enhancement. It's not worth the points it costs. It's kind of a toss-up between wanting to take the Shroud of Heroes or the Heavenfall Blade. I would lean towards the Heavenfall Blade to make my Strike Master a bit killier, because that gives him extra attacks, extra strength, extra damage. So that could be useful. On the other hand, Shroud of Heroes lets him resurrect on a 2+. So that could be interesting, whichever you prefer. And what he does is, the Strike Master, the main ability that he has is that he hands out lethal hits to any unit he joins. He can only join Terminator units. That's something worth remembering. But much like Belial, he's a Terminator character, so can only join Terminators. That's pretty standard across the board in 40k. You can only join units with the same armor as you. Which, to be fair, kind of makes sense. And then the other big thing is that he has a rule called Vanquish the Foe. And what this does is that if a unit he is attached to is attacking a unit that's below half strength, they gain +1 to hit and +1 to wound. Right away, I think that is, I don't want to say super powerful, because you have to be attacking a unit that's already kind of on the way out, but it's like, okay, if you're fighting an enemy unit of like 10 Terminators, and you've managed to whittle down 5 of them, all of a sudden, bam, +1 to hit, +1 to wound. And finishing off those last 5 Terminators could be really useful. Or it means that, like, doing even like 2 or 3 casualties to a Custodes unit, bam, +1 to hit and wound, which is really useful for finishing off Custodes. Yeah, so that's, I think, a much more impressive ability than what Belial does. I actually prefer the Strike Master. This kind of continues my trend of preferring non-named characters. I get that Belial hands out a lot of mortal wounds, and that's undeniably effective. I just think I'm going to end up using the lethal hits and Vanquish the Foe a lot more often. That one man's opinion. But these are both characters that can, again, Terminator armor can only join Terminators. So, if you're running for if you're wanting to run like a very Deathwing focused army, Strike Master is definitely gonna be great for you. You're gonna be able to bring out a very Terminator oriented force and have a pretty effective HQ. And you can bring, I could definitely see running like an all Deathwing force running Belial and 2 Strike Masters. That could definitely be very interesting. But, I'll have to wait to see. Oddly enough, I actually don't own any regular Deathwing Terminators. I have the Command Squad, I have the Deathwing Knights, I don't have any regular Deathwing Terminators. So, they're just a thing that I've always put off getting. They were never a priority for me. I'm more of a Green Wing guy. I have a pretty hefty Raven Wing collection, but yeah, my Deathwing collection is a little threadbare at the moment. So, honestly, I'm not particularly impressed with Belial, but I like the Strike Master so much that it might be the thing that gets me. Between the fact that we've also gotten a new Terminator sculpt out, that might be enough to make me go out and buy some Terminator squads, paint them up as Deathwing. Yeah, the Strike Masters really do impress me that much. I just really love that +1 to hit and wound thing. But anyways, next we have the Deathwing Command Squad. This is kind of the same as any other Command Squad. You have to take the Deathwing Champion, have to take the Deathwing Ancient, have to take the Deathwing Apothecary. which means I'm going to need to paint up a Deathwing Apothecary because I don't have one. But yeah, it's the same as any other command squad, but this time with Terminator armor and 3 wounds per model, whereas most command squads only have 2 wounds per model. I'm pretty sure. Objective control of 1, T5, movement 5, 2 up armor save, 4 up invulnerable. What this just does is that this command unit, when it has an apothecary, it can return 1 dead model per turn. Can't be returning character models. If it has the chapter Ancient in it, then it can add 1 to the objective control characteristic. So that means it can be OC2. That's kind of cool, I guess. Which, I mean, I say kind of cool. It actually could be very relevant. If you were running like a full 10-man command squad, having that banner, all of a sudden you got an OC of 20 in that 10-man squad. So now all of a sudden you got all the benefits of being like a tactical squad or an intercessor squad, but in Terminator form. So that actually could, I like how I'm just like talking myself into this in the moment, but yeah, it's actually, the more I'm thinking about it, the more this actually could be a really interesting effect. And then with the Deathwing champion, his bonus is just called Honor or Death. It's literally the exact same rule that all champions get. While the champion is here, add 1 to the advance and charge rolls for this unit. And I can I can use the heroic intervention stratagem for no CP. Again, not nothing. Using a free heroic intervention strat, really useful. Particularly if I also have a captain, like a Terminator captain, in my list, because I don't really like Belial, so I might just take a Terminator captain instead of Belial. And so, like, yeah, having a command squad here with a free heroic intervention strat, they get to heroic intervene. Then my Terminator captain they have the ability to use a strat that has already been used and do it for 0 CP. So then they could also get a free heroic intervention. So right away, that's a pretty interesting combo. And like I said, if you're running like a 10-man command squad, they're OC 20, 2 up armor save, toughness 5 all around. Any models with a storm shield gain an extra wound, so now there are 4 wounds on those Terminators, and you've got the Halberd of Caliban on the champion, which is a not terrible death dealer. So actually, let me see. It might have the stat. Oh yeah, so it's the Halberd of Caliban, 5 attacks, strength 6, AP 2, damage 2. And it has precision. So not quite as good as it was in 8th and 9th when it was strength 8. But could be worse. So yeah, pretty good death deal. So yeah, there are definitely combos available to make this a very scary unit. I think, oddly enough, the weird thing is this is like meant to be kind of like the bodyguard unit. This is meant to be like the command squad, and yet they're actually not something I would probably put my characters in with. I probably wouldn't put my Strike Masters or my Terminator captain here. Maybe I would. Maybe I'm not using my brain properly right now. But oddly enough, I would probably spread my characters to my regular Deathwing units, and then just let these guys go on their own, because the champion the champion and the banner kind of let them be their own standalone bastion, which I think could be really interesting. So I am appreciating how somehow I'm filming this and in the process am convincing myself to run certain units. That's not where I saw this video going, but okay. Yeah, and so moving on to the regular Deathwing Terminators, they are literally exactly the same as regular Terminators. They have the exact same stat line. The only difference here is that they have a slightly modified version of the Terminator rule, where normal Terminators, their whole thing is that they get +1 to hit against an Oath of Moment target. These models also get that, but they also gain an ability that lets them ignore any and all negative modifiers to their hit rolls or weapon skill. Or weapon skill and ballistic skill. So they can never suffer negative modifiers to hit, basically. Which, yeah, that's super strong. That's, like, hilariously strong. When you can... Because instead of saying you must ignore, you do ignore all modifiers, it's just you can ignore modifiers. So you can basically pick and choose which modifiers you want to keep. You can choose to accept all the positive ones and also choose to ignore all the negative ones. So I can literally just say, cool, I'm just always hitting at my full ballistic skill, always hitting at my full weapon skill, and block out the haters with ignore negative modifiers. That's ridiculously strong. And they still get the +1 to hit against Oath of Moment targets. So yeah, these guys unleash these guys against an Oath of Moment target, and they're just going to be an absolute beast. Throw in a Strike Master in there to give them lethal hits and potentially the +1 to hit and wound. These guys can do a bunch of damage with their Power Fists or Thunder Hammers, because you can run them for Thunder Hammers, and for whatever reason right now Thunder Hammers are completely free. I don't agree with that being a thing, but it's a thing you can do. I don't agree with free war gear, but again, Games Workshop clearly doesn't listen to me. And then the last data sheet we have here is the Deathwing Knights. These are the Deathwing unit I have right now, like this and the Command Squad. I love Deathwing Knights. I have always loved Deathwing Knights. They've again taken a bit of a nerf. That I am a little bit upset about. Their Mace of Absolution went from being strength 8 to being strength 6. I'm not super happy about that, because they were always supposed to be basically Thunder Hammers but better, and they're not anymore. Although, to be fair, where a Thunder Hammer does give you a lower weapon skill, these don't. So I guess that's kind of a bonus. So you're not hitting worse. So they've got a 2. Well, actually, let me make sure. Yeah, weapon skill 2+. Yeah, so Deathwing Knights have the weapon skill of 2+. So where a normal Terminator would be hitting on 4s with his Thunder Hammer, because that's what his weapon skill is. Even ignoring negative modifiers, cool, his weapon skill is still 4+ with the Thunder Hammer. So, well, actually, again, I might need to check that, make sure I'm right about that. Thunder Hammer... Yeah, weapon skill 4+. So yeah, Thunder Hammer... Again, this is one of the weird things about what they've done in 10th edition that I'm not crazy about, where instead of just taking a negative modifier for certain weapons, they're actually just giving you a lower weapon skill. Again, I'm not super crazy about that. I'm not incredibly happy with that. But it is what it is. And so the Deathwing Knights are hitting on 2s instead of 4s, so obviously that's way better. Oddly enough, it means that they probably don't need the Strike Master. The +1 to wound would still be nice, but again, they're already hitting on 2s, so I don't know that I need the Strike Master to hand out that +1 to hit and wound. But the Deathwing Knights, they also have a special unit ability that just says anytime you make an attack against them, they reduce damage by 1. Which is unbelievably powerful. That's literally what the entire Death Guard Legion trait was in 9th edition. So, really powerful, really strong. And because they come stock standard with Storm Shields, they're just 4 wounds a pop. So they're 4 wounds with a -1 damage. You have to hit them with a 5 damage weapon to one-shot one of these guys. I'm not even sure there are 5 damage weapons. There are obviously 6 damage weapons out there, but I'm not aware of any weapon that just does a flat 5 damage. So yeah, that's really interesting. They're super durable, super hard to get out of the way. I'm not crazy about Storm Shields just handing out an extra wound, but in this case, it's really working out for me with my Deathwing Knights. I would probably say put a Terminator Captain with your Deathwing Knights. Just to give them, again, the ability to use a free strat, even if that strat's already been used, and that be able to pile in. The other big thing that I'm kind of sad about with the Deathwing Knights is the Flail of the Unforgiven, which is the weapon that the unit Sergeant carries. It used to have a rule that let it spill over its attacks into... anytime you did excess damage to a model, that excess damage that would normally go away spills over to the next model. Well, he doesn't have that rule anymore. Which was a little disappointing, because he's had that rule for a really long time. At least since 8th edition. I don't think he had it in 7th, but he's had all of 8th, all of 9th, and now it's just gone. I'm a little upset about it. It's also strength 6, which feels a little weird, because traditionally his flail was always less damage but better AP, and it is now, because the maces are only AP 1, the flail is AP 2, but then the maces had better damage at damage 3, which they do, and he's still damage 2. But just the damage spillover was always really cool to me. I always thought it was really useful. But anyways, I'll quit my griping about it, because they're still really good. putting them in conjunction with like a Terminator Captain with the Heavenfall blade, unbelievably good way to really maximize some damage. So Deathwing Terminators in general are still looking pretty strong by the standards of Terminators. They've gotten rid of some of my favorite aspects, but oddly enough are still really good. I'm glad that the Deathwing characters have gone back to a command squad rather than being off on their own. That was always a really weird thing for me. As someone who started out playing in 7th edition, like I collected for a long time before that, but I started playing in 7th edition, it was really weird transitioning to them being just off on their own. So, and honestly, I don't know what I would do if they were independent characters, because like, suddenly it would just be, I have more characters than I have units that they can go with. And you would probably end up just stacking them all into one unit anyway, so why not just give them a squad to go with? Yeah. So I think that's a really positive change. The Deathwing are looking real strong. They're looking very effective. Anything you might say in favor of regular Terminators, the Deathwing have, and then some. So Games Workshop, as much as I might not like the exact execution, they have definitely nailed the, hey, you're a Terminator, but just a little bit better. And they've probably done it in a way that was more nuanced and more subtle than they did last time, because in 9th edition, they literally just said, hey, you have permanent transhuman, so you can never be wounded on better than a 4. That made a lot of people really upset. A lot of people were really not happy about that. So this is a more understated, subtle way to demonstrate, hey, you're a Terminator, but you're the best Terminators. So overall, Deathwing are looking really strong. Definitely a valid way to run your Space Marines. If you want to run... you have to run them in an Unforgiven Task Force. You can't run... Because they're Dark Angels specific, they're in the Dark Angels Index. You can't run them in a Gladius Strike Force. You have to run them as part of the Unforgiven Task Force. I've already made my opinions on the Unforgiven Task Force pretty clear in the previous 2 videos. If you haven't seen them, go watch. Spoiler alert, I'm not a fan of the Dark Angel detachment, but whatever. I'm still loving the Deathwing. I think that's going to be a really thematic and viable way to run Space Marines, to run Dark Angels. It looks like I have some Terminators to paint up. But anyways, I'll quit rambling. If you've made it this far in the video, I really do appreciate it. I hope there was something here that informed you, something that maybe gave you some ideas. Let me know. Are you going to be running Deathwing? Are you going to be running Dark Angels? If not, why not? I would genuinely be fascinated to know what you guys' thoughts on this are. I have noticed a lot of other people having different ways of looking at these units that kind of inform my own opinion. So I would love to hear what you guys think in the comments down below. I would love to see you guys in some of the other videos we're going to be putting up. In the meantime, happy wargaming.
Onward to glory!